me go around, and I was like, why?
Where's Don?
A couple of years ago, when we started talking about saving and planning a bucket list trip to Antarctica, some people said, "Wow!" Some said, "Isn't it cold there?" A few asked, "Why?" Only one said, "I'll go with you." Donna, an old travel buddy with Sherry, was involved from the beginning. Early in 2022, the trip was booked. Nomad Adventures, based in Minnesota, had recommended Oceanwide Expeditions. Both Nomad and Oceanwide were excellent choices. Sherry's research paid off well. On March 8th, we left Benson, Arizona and drove to the airport in Tucson. Donna flew from Charlotte, North Carolina, and we met in Houston, Texas. From there, it was a red-eye to Buenos Aires, Argentina, arriving in the morning on March 9th. We were met at the airport by our driver, Raul, and tour guide, Shimana. The next day, Raul and Shimana would take us on a tour of the city, but on the way from the airport to our hotel, La Hotel, they pointed out many points of interest. After checking in and taking a short, much-needed nap in real beds, we went out on our own for an afternoon walk through the local area of town, Palermo. We made our way along city streets. Past several historical monuments, including a memorial to Evita, Eva Peron. A professional dog walker. Past the American Embassy to a city park with a lot of unusual, at least to us, trees. While we were snapping photos, we were approached by a policewoman who in broken English asked us what we were doing. We replied in broken Spanish that we were taking photos of trees. She never specifically told us to put our cameras away, but her manner indicated that she'd be happier if we did. And we realized we were just across the street from the American Embassy. The following day, we learned from Shimana that a couple of days previously, a terrorist attempt at the embassy had been thwarted. Cameras came out again as we made our way towards the Rose Garden. And there was a very pretty lake with palm trees and paddle boats. We were all suffering a bit of jet lag and weren't used to the temperature in the 90s, so went back to La Hotel for an air-conditioned rest before heading out again for dinner. The Argentine beef lives up to its reputation, as does the Malbec wine. The next morning at about 9 o'clock, after a nice breakfast provided by La Hotel, Raul and Shimana arrived for a full-day city tour. Raul would be with us for a half day. The rest would be a walking tour with Shimana. The Cathedral of San Nicolas, originally built in the 16th century, has been modified several times over the years, so it's a mixture of architectural styles. It's hard to distinguish it as a cathedral from the outside, due to the influence of the Freemasonry in the ruling class in the 1800s. Inside is the tomb of José de San Martin, liberator of Argentina, Peru, Chile, and Ecuador. The entire floor of the cathedral is a mosaic of tiny tiles. The tomb of José de San Martin is watched by ceremonial guards 24 hours per day. Our next stop was El Teatro Colon, the opera house and symphony hall in Buenos Aires, judged one of the most beautiful in the world. The Plaza de Mayo, the central square in Buenos Aires, was filled with more than 5 million celebrating fans when Argentina won the World Cup in 2022. La Boca, a working-class neighborhood near the port of Buenos Aires, was a melting pot of immigrants in the early 20th century, with a heavy influx of Italians, mostly from Genoa. One of these Italians encouraged his neighbors to spruce up the barrio by cleaning things up and painting. It didn't matter how much paint you had. If it was enough to paint a door or a window frame, use it. Maybe someone else had enough to do a wall, or a half a wall, or whatever. As a result of a devastating fire in 1884, La Boca established the first volunteer fire brigade in Argentina. After a walk on the waterfront, we hopped on the subway for La Recoleta district. We walked past the law school, across the La Recoleta Bridge, a colorful pedestrian bridge. Went by the Cultural Center, which gets a new paint job every 3 months. And just outside the Recoleta Cemetery is the Church of Nuestra Señora de Pilar, the oldest church in Argentina that is still the same as when it was built in 1732. With 5,500 tombs, La Recoleta Cemetery dates to 1822 and is the final resting place for some of the richest and important people in Argentinian society. Presidents, opera singers, boxing champions, among others. Every tomb has a story, and Shimana told us many of them. I'll let her tell a couple here.
For instance, here you have a teenager that died when she was 15 years old due to leukemia, and her father was a famous writer, famous theater writer, but the family dedicated this sculpture because they were really fond of this young teenager, because we're the only daughter that they had. And this is the beginning of urban legend saying that this is the lady in white. So previous to being a fancy neighborhood, the Recoleta Cemetery was surrounded by, houses for prostitution and, low class bars and all that. So many drunk men, young men, used to hang around this area, and for many of them, this is an urban legend saying that they met a young lady that they fell in love, and when they approached to her, they touched her skin and she was really cold. So they offered a coat for them to be more comfortable. So they desperately fell in love with this girl, and suddenly the girl gave them a kiss. So she ran away. When they started chasing her, they found out that she chased here at the cemetery. So they were in the middle of the night saying, let me enter, because I have to recover my coat and I want to kiss that girl. So the guardian here at the door said, it's impossible, this is a cemetery. So after much insistence, they entered and they found out that the coat was on her body. So this is the lady in the white.
Okay.
So it's called La Dama de Blanco, the lady in the white, and it's one of the most common urban legends.
Right.
But I think it has to do with alcohol and yes, but it's the He was this close to beat Jack Dempsey at Polo Grounds in New York.
Oh, really?
And it's considered to be the first non-fair play in sports history, because he was this to win the fight.
Yes.
And in the second round, he threw a crossover. He flew Jack Dempsey out of the ring, and Jack Dempsey ended up in the journalism desk.
Oh.
So he had to get help to get back to the ring. And the referee, since Jack Dempsey was American and Firpo was the Latin American, and the bets were against the Argentinian, the referee, instead of saying 10, 9, he started to do 10, 9. So that happened. So Firpo was celebrating, and suddenly Firpo was back on the ring, and Firpo and Dempsey. And when Firpo was on the floor, the referee said, 10, 9, 8, oh, you lose. Jack Dempsey again.
Really?
Yes. So that was the story behind the Dempsey.
Maria Eva Duarte Peron, Evita, was born illegitimate and in poverty, yet rose in her short life as a champion to women and the poor. As First Lady of the country in May of 1952, she was given the title Spiritual Leader of the Nation. 2 months later, she was dead of ovarian cancer. Her body was embalmed with glycerin, and 8 people were crushed to death as 3 million people rushed to be near as she was being transported. For 2 weeks she lay in state at the Ministry of Labor. People lined the streets with flowers that had to be imported from Chile, as flower shops in Buenos Aires were emptied. Plans were made to construct a memorial larger than the Statue of Liberty for her final grave. While it was being built, for 2 years her body was displayed at the government office where she had worked. In the meantime, Juan Perón was overthrown, and he fled to Spain. Construction stopped, Evita's body disappeared. After 16 years, it was discovered in Milan, Italy, buried under an assumed name. She was exhumed, still looking as if she just died, and she was flown to Spain in 1971. Juan Peron and his third wife kept her corpse on a platform in their dining room until 1973, when he returned to Argentina and was again elected president. She was finally laid to rest in her family's, the Duarte's, tomb at La Recoleta Cemetery. She is still revered in Argentina today. As Ximena was telling the story, Sherry saw a visitor to the cemetery approach her tomb and gently place his hand on her name. Don't cry for me, Argentina. Do not cry for me. Lost or far away, I am an essential part of your existence. All love and pain was foreseen for me. I complied my humble imitation of Christ, who walked my path to follow his disciples. We could not have asked for a better tour guide than Ximena. She told us that there was so much more she wanted us to see, and we arranged to see her again when we returned to Buenos Aires on our way home after Antarctica. Not as a tour guide and clients, but as friends. A lovely and wonderful young lady. We'd walked for miles. It was hot, and we were happily exhausted. But the day wasn't over yet. We had reservations for a dinner theater that evening featuring a tango show. Dinner in Argentina is late. We had a driver scheduled to pick us up at the hotel at 8 o'clock. For some reason, they changed the pickup time to 8:30. We went back to the hotel for a much-needed rest. We weren't sure what time the show would actually begin. Our driver arrived promptly at 8:30, but our ride across town was delayed by both traffic and protesters. Yes, they definitely have political issues in Argentina too. We arrived well after our scheduled time, and our driver dropped us off in front of the theater and left with a promise to pick us up at 11:30. We went inside. "No, senor, we have no reservations for you." Were we even at the right place? We weren't sure. We thought we were already late, we hadn't eaten, and now this. The confusion ended when they found our reservation, which had mistakenly been canceled when our pickup time changed. No worries. This seems to be the Argentine version of "no problem" or "don't worry, be happy." They made the changes and escorted us to our table right at the foot of the stage in time for dinner, which for me was a perfectly cooked steak, for Sherry, fish, and for Donna, empanada, an Argentine meat pie. Unfortunately, no cameras were permitted during the performance, a big disappointment. I'd have loved recording some of the show on video. The dancing was great, and we were introduced to an instrument we'd never seen or heard, the charango. The charango dates back to Spanish colonial times in the Andes. The natives liked the sounds of the Spanish stringed instruments, but didn't have the technology to make something from wood, so they used an armadillo shell. The modern version is made from wood and has a wonderful sound. We were blown away with the player's rendition of El Condor Pasa. I'm not sure what time we got back to La Hotel, but it was late. We'd had a thoroughly enjoyable day and evening and an early pickup to get to the airport for our flight to Ushuaia, the southernmost city in the world, for a couple of days before cruising to Antarctica. Stay tuned, there's more to come.